You stand on the shore of the ocean watching the tide come in. You sense the call of the sea beckoning to take you further. You step forward little by little, not knowing what to expect, but expecting more. You keep going as the ocean calls you to enter in to deeper waters.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Deeper Waters podcast. I'm Nick Peters, your host, seeking to bring you the very best in Christian scholarship and apologetics. And today we had originally scheduled to talk with my guest about his book, The Secret Battle of Ideas About God, but due to some difficulties and such, he's only going to be able to give us half an hour, so we're going to do that next year. For now, we're going to talk about his ministry. But before we do that, let me just introduce him. He's Dr. Jeff Myers. He's president of Summit Ministries, which we're going to be talking about. A highly respected worldview training program whose tens of thousands of graduates are making a difference in politics, law, academics, medicine, science, and business. In the last 20 years, Dr. Myers has become one of America's most respected authorities on youth leadership development. Focus on the Family founder James Dobson referred to him as a very gifted and inspirational young leader. Evangelist Josh McDowell called him a man who is 100% sold out to prepare the next generation to reflect the character of Christ in the culture. Through his appearances on Fox News and other media programs, Dr. Myers has become a fresh voice offering humor and insight from a Christian worldview. He holds a Doctor of Philosophy degree and teaches leadership courses through Lunaret and Bearhaven University. Jeff and his family live in Colorado. So, Dr. Myers, welcome to the Deeper Waters podcast.
Thank you, Nick. Great to be on your show. And I'm sorry that it's cut short for today, but I'll look forward to another conversation early in the next year.
Okay. If my audience doesn't know who you are, could you tell us a little bit about how you got to be doing what you're doing?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you my story by way of introducing Summit Ministries. When I was a little kid, I was born in Detroit, Michigan, and grew up there for many years. And it was a rough place to grow up. I mean, I was offered hard drugs for the first time at 7 years of age. Remember cowering under my bed at the sound of a gunshot in the streets. And so my parents, who were from Kansas and Oklahoma, decided as soon as it was financially feasible, they would get out of there. And they did. So I was almost 10. We moved back to Kansas. And that's culture shock to move from Detroit, Michigan to Great Bend, Kansas. But we moved from a church of 2,000 people to a church of 20 people. I tell people, our family of 4 walked in the door. We increased attendance by 20% in 1 minute. Just that's how small of a church it was. And it was a nice country church, very friendly, very caring people, but not the kind of people, Nick, who really thought very much about their faith. Yeah. And so my brother, and there wasn't any programming for kids like us. So the first Wednesday that we were there, they said, well, why don't you boys just play outside while we have our prayer meeting? And so we did that, and we found that they had a one-car garage type shed on the property, and they had some gasoline and some masking tape and some Dixie cups and some matches. And so we made a bomb and lit it in the parking lot. And they weren't sure what to do with boys from Detroit. So we put it all out, and everything was fine. We didn't really even think anybody had noticed. But the very next week, they had a youth program. And there were 2 kids in it, my brother and me, and we had a guy there named Don who was a grocery store manager, took care of us, invested in us, family loved on us. But we kind of returned the favor by asking tough questions like, if God is really loving, how would he send people to hell? And how do we know there is a God? And isn't evolution showing that God didn't really create? We'd ask those sorts of questions. And Don didn't have answers to those questions. He had the questions that occurred to him, but he had never been in a place where he had needed to defend his faith, hadn't been to university, hadn't been outside of the small town where pretty much everybody has the same beliefs. So he arranged, and with my father and another lady in the church, arranged for me to come to a Summit Ministries program in Colorado. And I knew I was going to be going out for Colorado for 2 weeks. I knew I'd be hearing speakers and getting some answers. I walked into the building, which is this antique hotel in this little hippie town of Manitou Springs, Colorado. Walked into the lobby, and there was David Noble himself, the founder of the ministry. So I walked right up to him, and I said, I hope you have a lot of answers because I have a lot of questions. I realized how rude that is to introduce yourself that way, but I was desperate for answers. And Nick, David Noble said to me, he was not offended in the least by this. He just looked at me and said, we're not afraid of any questions here at Summit. And that meant everything to me. He didn't say, we have all the answers, don't worry about it. You don't have to think. We'll just tell you what to believe. He said, we're not afraid of any questions. And that began to shape my understanding of a Christian faith. I had graduated high school, and I had fully intended that I would leave church at the same time I graduate from church, same time I graduated from high school. But it was really through David Noble's influence and mentoring over the next few years that I came to faith in Jesus. And then got to know David Noble a little bit. And then when I was in graduate school at the University of Denver, helped him put together some curriculum material called Understanding the Times. And then through the years, we just got to be friends. And I got on the board. And when David Noble decided to retire, he asked me to take his place, which of course is one of the greatest honors that a person can be given, is to be handed the baton from a trusted, valued mentor. So that's a little of my story. And the Summit program does the same thing for young people today, except for a lot more of them. I think there might have been 200 students who in the entire summer when I was there as a youth. But now we'll have 1,800 students in 12 different 2-week sessions all across the country. And then a lot more doing about 40,000 students studying Summit Ministries materials, Understanding the Times, and some of our other courses that we've designed in biblical worldview in their Christian schools and churches.
I'm not sure if you know this, but my friend Gary Habermas, I'm sure you know about him, he grew up in Detroit as well.
Yes, we have talked about that sometimes and compared some notes about that. Yeah, he grew up there in the glory days in the 1950s. But there wasn't much left by the time I was a little kid there in the 1960s. The 1960s hit pretty hard, race riots and all sorts of tension. And, America now is we have our troubles, but man, it's so calm compared to what it was then. And anyway, but a rough place. But it really that was the catalyst that pushed us back to a small town and introduced me to the ministry that has shaped my life. And now I have the opportunity to give that gift to others.
Well, we have to kind of rush through things some today, so I'd like to let everyone know you are listening to Deeper Waters podcast. Dr. Jeff Myers of Summit Ministries is my guest, but if you're here next week, we're going to be talking about another apologetics ministry that's being done to help reach youth. I'm sure Dr. Myers is probably familiar with. Brett Kunkar is going to be my guest talking about Maven Apologetics and what he's doing with that. So if you're interested in even more of this stuff, come back next week and we'll talk about it even more. Now,
that'd be great. Nick, I want to mention that Brett is one of our regular speakers at our Summit sessions. So if people listen to that and say, wow, this is great, I really like Brett, well, they can come and study with him and with me and with J. Warner Wallace from Cold Case Christianity and Sean McDowell and others. And that's what we do during these 2-week sessions.
And let people know that Sean McDowell has been on this show twice. J. Warner Wallace has been on 3 times, so chances are when you go to Summit, you'll probably hear someone who's been on this show before.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And you get to meet them in person, which is always fun, right? Yeah.
Now, you talked a bit about in this bio about worldview thinking and such. That could be something new to some people. What do you mean by worldview thinking?
Well, worldview is a pattern of ideas, of beliefs, convictions, habits, that help us make sense of God and make sense of the world and make sense of our relationship between God and the world. So what we teach at Summit that's unique is that there is such a thing as a biblical worldview. There is a biblical way of seeing, not just securing a place in heaven when we die, but a way of seeing what we have now in this world, a biblical way of thinking about, and we look at theology, philosophy, ethics, biology, psychology, sociology, law, politics, economics, history, and students, it's mind-blowing for them because they realize I can be a confident Christian in every single class I have at college. not just defending the resurrection, for example. That's really important. But what do Christian historians do? Why is a Christian worldview important if we want to really grasp what really is true about history? That kind of thinking. Who are the great historians who were Christians? And so students get that kind of understanding. But Nick, the other part of it is we help the students understand that there are competing worldviews that give an alternate view of reality, that say they reveal more of reality to the students, and so they should forsake their Christianity and become, say, secularists or Marxists or postmodernists or Muslims or new spiritualists. So at Summit, we give students an introduction to each of those worldviews, so they are not caught off guard when they hear about them and find people who advocate those views. And then they further can understand that only a biblical worldview really reveals reality as it really is. When we say that the Bible is true, that's what we're saying. We're saying that all these other worldviews, they try to like if you're a materialist, only the material world exists, that anything that might be a spiritual experience or even a mental experience makes no sense to you. You're trying to explain reality with half of reality tied behind your back. And that's why students come through Summit and have such a great experience. They don't just get apologetics, they get a worldview that applies to everything they face when they go off to college.
And I let everyone know that you're listening to the Deeper Waters podcast. I'm going ahead and doing this because that way we can focus on our time on guests here, but everything we do here is listener supported. And, we really do need your support. I mean, there's a lot of expenses. I mean, just this week we found we're going to have to give our cat some dental work, for instance. And if any of your pet owners out there, you know how it is with your pets. They're your little fur babies. And anyway, if you want to help us out with the work that we do around here, please go to my website, deeperwatersapologetics.com. There's a link on the side. Help support the work of Deeper Waters Christian Ministries. And you click there, in the link in there, and you get taken to the ministry of Risen Jesus. You're still at the right place. That's my in-laws, Mike and Debbie Lacona. And you make a donation through them, and then you get in touch with Mike or Debbie or Allie or myself and say, hey, I made a donation. I want to go to Nick Peters. I want to go to Deeper Waters. And they will make sure that we get your donation, and it will be tax deductible. And you can also buy some ebooks that I've written or co-written on Amazon. I won't go through the list this time just to save time. And then jewelry, another way you can support us. We have a jewelry store. Again, touch with me if you want to find out more. But whatever you buy at the jewelry store, 25% of it goes to Deeper Waters. So guys, you can buy something special for that lady in your life to make up for that big screw up that you just made. Or you can buy something as future insurance for that big screw up that I know you're going to make. Yeah. You've been there before, haven't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. You're right on. This is...
Now, Dr. Miles, do you have an organization you'd like to see people donate to?
Well, I'd love to see people support Deeper Waters. I think that's the main thing. But I do want people to know about Summit Ministries. You can come to summit.org to find out. We focus on young adults 16 to 25 years of age. And they're our target audience, but anybody of any age can come to a Summit session. We would love to have you. We'd love to have you bring a group. And there are group discounts and early bird specials all listed there at summit.org.
Now, Dr. Miles, this sounds so revolutionary. Are you telling me if we want our Christian young people to be prepared for college or anything else out there in the world, since not everyone goes to college, it might actually take more than just pizza parties and concerts?
You're right. You can have a lot of fun playing paintball and volleyball and all of that, but you're right. I mean, the truth is a lot of young adults today, all the ones we work with, and I think all the ones I've ever met, they have real questions, and they just don't know they don't know whether they like the Christian people in their life. They just don't know if Christianity is a worldview that has answers for anything that they're facing other places. And Nick, further, I think a lot of young adults today, a lot of ones we're working with are in the millennial generation. They you have to think differently with them.
Yeah.
For example, I remember hearing a pastor and give a sermon, and it was a very large church, and he said, well, I'm so old. When I was growing up, the closets were for clothes, not for strange people coming out of. And, everybody in the audience laughed and they clapped.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, that might be a fun joke for somebody who's, having coffee with their fellow 80-year-olds. But for the millennials, you can just feel them shrinking inside, right? Because they're thinking, wow, if I said that around the water cooler at my work, I would be shunned.
Yep.
I would be, that people would say, you should be ashamed of yourself. It would be the end of my career. That we live in a different kind of world. And and what young adults are asking for is not to be excused from having to find answers to the big questions. They're just wanting answers to the big questions that make sense to everybody else. And somebody says, well, it's only spiritual. No, that's not true. If God's truth is true, it should apply to every area of life, that what we believe should be able to make sense to people who aren't even believers.
Dr. Myers, this is such a passion of mine because I'm 37 right now, and I grew up, and I've always been an intellectual all my life. I mean, most studious, superlative in high school, which I thought was odd since I never had to study even really. And all my years growing up in church, no one ever told me about apologetics or why we know Christianity is true or anything like that. I didn't find out about that until I got to Bible college. And then when I discovered it, became a passion. It's like, where has this been all my life? How come no one ever told me anything?
Yeah, people just don't know, do they?
No.
And that's one of the things we have as a Passion at Summit, is that what we do in biblical worldview training, we'd be able to get into churches with adults. We don't have to reach all the churches in America, but if we just reached, 1% of them, I think it could have a significant impact. And imagine how much more confident adults would feel if they knew they could find answers. They would be more confident in working with young people. They'd be more confident in sharing what they know. They'd be more confident in asking questions. And that alone has a big impact. The Barna Research Group found that a young person who has an adult friend in church is twice as likely to stay involved in church as opposed to walking away.
But, Dr. Myers, this is very interesting, but, maybe it's not that big a deal. I mean, kids go off to college and they don't have a Christian worldview equipped on their belts, and maybe they'll get it there. What's the big deal?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest deal is that if the Bible is true, if a biblical worldview is true, then to accept any other worldview is to accept something about the world that either shades or obscures or ignores something that's really real. And so, my training was as a philosopher, and what you want to know as a philosopher is not whether I'm comfortable with all the answers I'm coming up with, but that I'm really describing the world as it actually exists. Because in doing that, I will find a life of flourishing. When Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life, it's fascinating. He chose the exact 3 words that Greek philosophers used for a long time. We're in the search for goodness and truth and beauty. Those are the 3 things that we want to find answers to live a flourishing life. So I think it is about our eternal security, but I think God secures us eternally so that in time, in creation, we can spread the good news, which is not just that you need to say a prayer to accept Jesus into your heart, but that Jesus Christ is Lord of all and that he has authority over every area of life.
Yeah, but I mean, our young people go off to college, and so they encounter some questions, and they don't have the answers to. I mean, that doesn't really affect them. I mean, they don't really walk away and such now, do they?
Well, you see, there are two things happening, right? You've got truth and relationship. We could think of those as the 2 strands of the DNA double helix. So a lot of times there's relational stuff happening to a kid when they're in college. They're around all these other people who are non-believers. Then they get a girlfriend and they want to have sex with their girlfriend. And then they're looking for ways to justify that, but with what they're learning in class. And so intellectually and morally, I think the collapse happens a lot faster than people realize. It's not just that they are embracing, bad ideas because those ideas somehow are good. It's that they come more like viruses. And that's what I'm hoping we'll have a chance to talk about when we talk about my book, The Secret Battle of Ideas About God. That ideas infect us like viruses, and they hijack us, they reproduce, and they make us miserable. At the same time, if you watch enough television, it'll promise you that it can answer your questions about, am I loved, and why do I hurt, and what is the purpose of my life? And the more we pay attention, the fewer answers we have. That's the way of the world. And I'm afraid that it's most intense for young adults. If you see a Facebook meme that confronts your viewpoint, that's fine, but you can just scroll on to the next Facebook meme. But if you are in college and your professor gives a 30-minute sustained argument for that viewpoint, it's awfully hard to resist that unless you have been well trained to understand that there's a worldview that the professor is assuming to be true, but without ever proving it, that goes on behind the scenes. At Summit, the students learn to pick out that worldview, not in order to be critical of the professor, but to recognize what's really happening in that situation. It's not that Jesus is being disproven somehow. It's that the professor is trying to get students to think from another worldview, and that without ever having to advocate for or prove that other worldview is a better way of seeing reality.
Yeah, I like the fact that you point also not just to intellectual struggles, but moral temptations, because those intellectual struggles can suddenly become much more feasible if you have a morally sufficient reason to go that way. And yes. I'm a guy who got married when I was nearly 30, and so yes, I understand the struggle of waiting so long and such. And our kids need some serious thinking about how every aspect of their world works. And we've talked about sexuality plenty of times on the show with several guests, and one things that sticks with me is something I read in Lauren Winner's book years ago, that if a guy and a girl on a couch together, it's going to take more than just a few verses in Paul in their head to keep them from doing anything.
Right. Because we live in a created world in which we were given by our Creator sexual chemistry.
Yeah.
Part of His good gift to us. But yes, that is. I think that is true. If it's funny when this summer we talked a lot about. We in each of our summit sessions we end up discussing sexuality a lot because so many students struggle with same-sex attraction. So many students struggle with pornography and feeling guilty about their use of it, and so. But I said, have you ever wondered why in the movies people have to have sex before they fall in love? They always have sex before they fall in love. Yeah. And the students started talking about it. And they said, well, that's a worldview, isn't it? That's a secular worldview. It says that we're only physical creatures. From a secular worldview, it's only physical. And if our strongest physical impulses are sexual, then it literally is not possible to fall in love without having sex, because your sexual chemistry has to be put into action before anything that we might call love could actually occur.
You have to know you're compatible.
That's right. That's a worldview issue, isn't it? That each one of so our students, when they see the movies and listen to music, they're picking out this stuff all the time, saying, "Oh, no, you're assuming that to be true, but you've never proven that. So let's go back. Is this only a material universe?" Those are the kinds of questions that you'll get from our. You'll know a Summit grad if you meet them, because they're going to just be very polite but very persistent in asking questions that get to the root of the issue.
Yeah, as you know, we're having to rush through things, but a lot of people could be wondering about where they can meet these things. I mean, honestly, until you told me just now, I thought everything took place in Colorado and such. If people want to find a summit in their area, what do they do?
Well, we've got 4 locations. You can come to summit.org. So we have California, Colorado, Pennsylvania, and Tennessee. So you will have to travel to one of those or the other, but they're pretty much within a day's drive of just about everybody in the United States. And of course, more than half the students get on an airplane and fly, thanks to some good flight rates that are from some discount airlines these days. But just go to summit.org and you can find the programs begin in the middle of May and they go all the way through the end of August.
I'm guessing you're working on establishing even more summits.
That's right. We had 10 last summer. We moved up from 7 to 10, and now we're moving from 10 to 12. But the goal is we will ultimately have 20 to 30 of these operating in different places around the country that'll be conveniently located and can handle the number of students who are demanding this kind of training these days.
Well, Dr. Myers, it's a shame we have to cut things so short, but we do look forward to next year talking more about your book and diving even deeper into this. If people want to get in touch with you or find out more about you or Summit Ministries, do you have a blog, an email, or a website they can go to?
Well, the website is summit.org, and I don't really have a blog per se, but different commentaries are on there, and there is a podcast you can sign up for there. One thing people might want to do is take a worldview checkup. It's a free test that you can take online to see what the worldview influences have been in your own life, and you might be surprised at how many ideas you've picked up. And it's no shame to us. We just want to acknowledge it so we can have the mind of Christ.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave for the Deeper Waters audience today?
Well, I'm thankful for what you're doing and the people you've had on here and the way you help people go deeper. And I just want to say, if you're the kind of person who loves to go deeper, then we want to be friends.
Right.
Summit is one of those organizations that can walk alongside of you and help you and train those you love, so that together we can have a stronger influence for Jesus in our culture.
Yeah, I'm always pleased to know a guest has been looking over the ministry and such before coming on. And I'm glad to do anything I can to help out with Summit.
Yeah, well, thank you, Dick. I know you've got a lot of our Summit speakers who are on there, and we'll just continue. We kind of get to walk together from a distance, but I'm glad we get to walk together.
Well, Dr. Myers, I'd like to thank you for coming on, and we do look forward to next year when you'll be able to come back on, and we'll be talking in depth about your book, The Secret Battle of Ideas About God.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that as well, Nick.
I'd like to remind everyone that next week we're going to have Brett Maven on talking about his apologetics ministry, Maven. For now, I'm Nick Peters, and I'm signing off.